Oh my God.
What brings you balance in life?
Oh my gosh. What brings me balance in life would be two things. Funny because like on a scale, it's two things. It would be God and community. So, God and community brings me balance in life.
Those are two good things to have because those are the roots that you really need if you want to be a strong tree, so to speak.
Yes, indeed. Oh my gosh. I never thought about it before. Thank you.
You can have that one. You can have that one. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space Podcast. I'm your host, Leah, and this week we are joined by Dio Lopez, and she is the host of The Prophet and the Tea. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Leah. You're so amazing.
In this series, we are talking about being a survivor and the importance of surviving. But before we get into our topics today, let me ask you, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm laughing because I hear the song by Destiny's Child. I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna give up. Okay. So yeah, I hear Destiny's Child song and yeah, I'm a survivor and I'm gonna survive. And I'm Dioveris Lopez. I'm calling me Dio because I have letters in my name and it's kind of hard to put together. But anyway, that's not the story. I am a creative being. I would start with that. It's hard to like box myself in. I freak out when I start to put labels on myself. But if I were to I would start. I'm a creative person. I'm a creative being. I'm a mother. That's important. And I love to express myself in whatever way I'm allowed to at the moment, or I feel led to at the moment. So that's painting. I'm an artist. Bam. I'm a speaker, podcaster, spoken word artist, and so I do that as well. I'm a creativity coach, so I help other creatives break through um, uh, blockages that are emotionally driven because we use the same side of our brain to create that we use to process emotion. And so a lot of the times when you don't deal with it, you have a block. So I do that. And I just love people. Like, that's just who I am. And I can be angry sometimes, but we can get into that later.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. What does being a survivor mean to you?
Oh God, being a survivor to me means two things. Not giving up because, okay, maybe this is one thing with two things in it. Not giving up because of hope, right? I think if you can have hope, you can survive. Because hope is something that you can't see. You can't see it. You're not attaining it right now, but you just something in you is allowing you to believe that there's greater, there's better, there's more. And if you can hope, you can survive. So that's what it means to me.
So let's get into your story a bit because you have a fascinating story. I heard your story first when we were in church and how much you had overcome at that point. This was maybe 3 years ago, before you left and went to another church. And everyone was so sad to see you go. And I was like, who is this woman? What do you mean? Like, oh, she was here and she helped and she was loving and she just showed all this grace to so many people. Everyone loved you. And I was just like, who is this woman? I don't understand. Like, can you tell me who she is? And just hearing so many different parts of your story, I was like, you have to be a part of this series. So, if you wouldn't mind, are you all right? You
Yeah.
okay? Okay.
I'm like, when was this? I was like, Lord, you know what's crazy is that you never know who's watching.
Yeah.
You never know who's around, who's witnessing your life. And so that gives me my tears are like trying to like well up because Yeah, well, it's insane. But yes, I'm okay.
Okay. No, it was at the time of you leaving Elevation. I had first met you um during a vision board party. And it
Ah.
was at that point that I met you, and you were really sweet, really kind, and everyone was so sad that you were leaving. And I was just like, well, I didn't get to meet this amazing person. What do you mean she's leaving? And you were just so willing to help and willing to step in, offer advice, pray with people. And all of the people
Mhm.
there had something wonderful to say about you. And getting
Mhm.
to know you over these last couple of years, you have not proven them wrong. You have
Oh, thank you,
absolutely lived
Lord.
up to what everyone has said. And we all go through struggles in life. But there's something about being able to go through something and not look like what you've been through. And I think that
Mm.
you have been an embodiment of that. So
Wow.
let's get into a little bit of your story to talk a little bit about some of the things that you have gone through. Because I came in the middle of the story. I only know a little bit, but what
Yeah.
are if there's a specific event or a story that you would like to tell about your survival, just this is your time. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah. Wow. Yeah. So I was mentioning to you earlier that my story of survival started in the womb. And most, we all have a story. But when my mom shared this with me, I was amazed. And about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I went through a very pivotal like switch in my life. Like it was crazy. Like I thought I was losing my mind, and my mom did too. Like she told me later she thought I was gonna end up in a home. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
So it was tough, but I began to explore this thing I knew about myself that I never really dug deep into, and it was the fact that I was a twin in the womb. And it's funny, we talked about anger just a second ago. I said it jokingly, but what was revealed to me was that in the womb, there was a moment of anger that caused and rage and like upsetness that caused that twin to die, to miscarry. But I was still there in the womb. And
mm,
so that's where my, survival started. And um, I was praying and wondering, like, why do I deal with anxiety like this? When in that time frame it was bad. It was like my mind would go places, and it would live in places that were not true. And I would worry so badly to the point where, like, we're hyperventilating, and it's crazy. So I remember the Lord telling me it's because of the separation, the anxiety caused in separation from growing for so long in the womb with this being that was a part of you. And so when I think about survival, when I think about my story and how, what's that main thing, it's like it started from the beginning. But then different time, like different points of my life, more is sorry, my daughter's texting me, y'all. So if I sound a little messed up is because I'm focusing on too many things at once. But ultimately, from the womb, my mom having me, I was born with jaundice. I had to stay in the hospital for a month. So you know how important it is for skin to skin contact with parents, but I didn't get that immediately. So had to survive on my own in an incubator. You know what I'm saying? Like all these moments that we don't consider important, but they are, right?
mm,
Because yeah, you learn to survive on your own, do it on your own, be strong on your own. And about when I was 2, my dad got deported to the Dominican Republic, and I got lead poisoning. So I had to go stay at a hospital for a few weeks to get my blood cleaned out. So I had to survive, like so many instances of survival again. And then it just continued as I grew older. It became more like grown up things, and here I am today, still surviving, but now I'm not doing it on my own. Hallelujah. Leaning on Jesus.
so As you were going through those things, because you had a start. That
Yeah.
was a start to your life. As you are growing in your spiritual journey and going through those things, you talk about anxiety, you talk about separation, you talk about making sure that you have that community and really healing from those things. What steps are you taking to go from survival to living?
Yeah. The first things first is you have to be willing to be exposed, right? Like
Hmm.
I had to hear it from somebody that I didn't want to hear it from. That yo, you live on survival mode. What's wrong with you? And it was just like, oh my gosh, yo, bickering. But when you have to sit down by yourself and you have to hear those things again, if you're the type of person that's teachable and you always want to grow, it's gonna replay in your head and you're gonna seek that thing out. Like, what does that mean, Lord? Why am I living like this? Why am I doing this? And so it starts with being willing to be exposed and then willing to change. I had to go through therapy. From 15, I was in therapy because of someone. I had a summer job. One of the guys was taking like pictures of the summer workers, but when we went to look at the pictures, it was really only pictures of parts of me. And that's when, like when I say parts of me, like my shoulder, my hair, my face, my arm, like it was really weird and it was intentional. And so I started therapy then. And in different stages of my life, especially transitional stages of my life, I went to therapy. And even to this day, if it's hard, if it's pressing, I'm going to go see a therapist. I have one because we're not meant to do it alone.
Right.
And when we do it alone, we get stuck in pride. We get stuck in that victim mentality. Like I had to do it on my own. It's only me. It's all about me. And that's not how we were created to live. And so therapy, community, having safe spaces. I'm a strong-willed person. I have lots of strong-willed friends, and I help a lot of people. And for a very long time, I didn't allow myself to be helped by others. Even when I was going to therapy, I still didn't have community. I still wasn't living in the light, pure honesty, not being ashamed of my imperfections. And so, being around people that love you right where you are, number one, testifies to God's love for you, but number two, it's like it helps you grow. If I can be this vulnerable here, then you know I don't have to be ashamed of where I'm at. I'm not living hidden and I'm not forced to hide this thing. I can just now bloom. So therapy, living in the light, that's what I call it, being woke, whatever you want to call it. Like just be honest and be true and be vulnerable. And then reframing our mind, that's what counseling helps you do. But you also have to do the work when you leave that person's couch. You gotta be intentional about what you're thinking. Like, what am I thinking when I hear thoughts that just I used to create so many narratives in my brain, and it would move so fast I couldn't catch them. And the word of God says, take every thought captive. You know how hard that is, because we think so many thoughts in a day.
Right.
But more intention I put behind being in what do you say it? I don't know. Anyway, pretty much the more I'm intentional about my thoughts being present is the word I was looking for, then I'm able to capture my thoughts. I can hear the stories I'm telling myself, like, that is not true. How'd you get to that, Dioveris? Like, girl, cast that thing down. What is the truth? And then you have to walk yourself through that. What's the truth? The truth is, I don't know. So let me not make up a story so that I can feel like I know something. So, so I can have an answer to the problem. I just don't know. So yeah.
That is that is a good point, because if you don't stop yourself when that story starts to develop, good or bad, right? When you don't know something, we tend to try to make assumptions, make up stories, and sometimes it's to bring ourselves comfort. So we say, okay, we know how this is going to play out. Let's think of 1,000 different scenarios. But here's what happens when we think of all those scenarios.
Yep.
When it doesn't happen like you're expecting, oh my gosh, I have a feeling that I'm going to get XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. I'm manifesting. I'm thinking. I'm focusing. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. And then after day 6, day 10, day 12, you don't get it. Now you have to put yourself through a grieving process for a
Ooh,
thought that you had, because you created this, and you created this once. You probably already spent the money. You probably already thought about that you were going to get this thing. This person was going to come and save you. This house, this car, this job. You probably already created so many scenarios where this thing happened and it didn't. Now you're grieving, going into depression because you couldn't stop yourself from creating that narrative in your mind. So I think that is a good
oh my
idea
God.
to just stop it there, so that you're not having to go through that grieving process. I want to not have to grieve
Mm-hmm.
for things that didn't happen. If
Right.
if I can just stop
Right.
grieving for things that didn't happen, oh my word.
Yeah. You'd have more
Like,
space to enjoy the things that are actually happening and it's not bad.
exactly. Yes. Like, that was all in your head, right? That was all. Now you're
Right?
now you're moody, now you're upset and taking it out on other people
Yes.
because you had a thought that you let run away with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
really
Wow.
think that that part is very important, and we don't talk about the why you capture your thoughts,
Yes.
why you absolutely have to be conscious about the things that you think about,
Yes.
because who wants to grieve something or be upset or frustrated about something that you thought wasn't but it was, or you thought that was but it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
when you can
And
just
I had to,
say I
sorry, go
don't
ahead.
know. Oh no, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just gonna say I've had to pick myself up. I mean, by the grace of God, I'm sure the Lord was with me. I had to be picked up from a low place every single, and I could tell you situation after situation after situation where I created a whole narrative, a whole story, a whole other life in my thoughts, and the thing, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Caroline Leaf, but she's amazing, and she talks about the thought, the brain, the mind, and she does this thing called neurocycles, helping you create a whole new thought pattern after
Hmm.
capturing the thoughts. And um, I mean, it's amazing. You should go look her up. I'm not going to go into that, but what I find is that until I get tired of being sick and tired, I'm going to do the same thing over and over again. And the sad part about it, though, is you get so deep. Those roots, you mentioned something like a tree, right?
Hmm.
Earlier when we talked about balance, the roots get so deep. The longer you dwell in lies, the harder it is to pull those roots up and create something new. So that's why I ain't trying to preach at y'all, but I be preaching. So like that's why the Bible says, every day renew your mind. You got to renew your mind daily, and people do it in different ways. It's like a universal principle, right? It's like a
Hmm.
a law that just God set in order. If you Christian or not, it works. And so you gotta feed your mind, you gotta feed your spirit, you gotta feed yourself good things, positive, true things. And for me, it aligns with the word of God. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. When I feel not so confident and now my behaviors are pushed because of that driving factor is like, insecurity. So now I'm going out there and I'm trying to survive, right? By behaviors that are not good, just to get a little attention, to feel confident. Like, it's a mess. So I got to take that time when I open my eyes. It's a whole new day. It's a whole new moment. I'm good. Like, I'm beautiful. I'm strong. I can do this. I begin to praise God, and I'm driven by these positive things. And then I can go out in this day, and I don't have to live guarded and protect myself and survive and be watching over my shoulder every second. Who's talking about me?
Hmm.
Who's worrying about? No, I don't have to do that anymore, because I have something more solid, more true, more real, and it takes time. It takes time. The same amount of time it took me, what, 28 years. So I got to be full of grace, because it might take me that long to fully undo what has been done before I met Jesus. That's for me.
I think you bring up some really great points about the habits that we create in survival,
Mm-hmm.
because the lies that we believe, we know that they're not true, but for whatever reason we try to justify them as being true. They're
Yeah.
talking about me. They don't even know your name. What are you
Right.
talking about? They don't know you. What do you Well, I can't do it. Well, did you try? Well, no. Then how do you know you can't? Because I know that I can't. When honestly, the truth is you just don't know, but you applied something someone said to you, something you thought that you didn't capture, something that you now
Mm.
believe, something that is deep seated. And now you're saying, well, I'm going to keep doing this thing, living my life on a loop because there's nothing else for me. What are some other characteristics, some other practices that you have found yourself doing as you're living in survivor mode?
Repeat that. What did I find myself doing?
What are some characteristics or some habits, maybe some traits that you have
Yeah.
picked up while living in survivor mode? I know you talked about the lack of vulnerability. You talked about, your pride, but what are some actual things that people can say, okay, well, yes, this person is living in, survivor mode, but maybe they just need someone to show them that love. But what are some
Yeah.
traits that people can go, oh, I am living in survivor mode?
Yeah. Expecting the worst. Expecting the worst every single time. Recently I have been able to, like, I feel like I've been shaking inside of me, and it was like, listen to what you're doing, or pay attention to what you're doing, which is when I get a phone call that I'm not expecting, I immediately think something is wrong.
Mm.
Right? Or um, this has been the case before, when somebody's upset, immediately thinking I did something wrong. So I'm trying to fix the problem, and I have no confirmation whatsoever that I had anything to do with this person's emotion or behavior. Um, but
Hmm.
the always expecting the worst, that leaves you trying to survive in you now prepare your vessel, your heart, yourself to and then so you start sabotaging, you start self-sabotaging, you start
Mm.
your friends, you have friends that love you, but something must be wrong. They must, no, you start making these little, you hear these thoughts, and then all of a sudden you push them away, because now because you're expecting them to be gone sometime soon. You're expecting them to talk about you. You're expecting them to tell you what they've done for you. So, and throw it in your face. So now you just sabotage that relationship. I'm done. I don't need you. I'm good. And then you start telling yourself these things, right? Like, that's okay. I don't need them. I've been doing this by myself anyway. When I was pregnant and we were in college, I expected myself for I expected the worst, and I prepared myself for the worst. So what did I do? You don't have to be here. When I announced my pregnancy to the father, what did I say? You don't have to be here. I could do it by myself, because my mama did it by herself. So I'm good. But he wanted to be there. Like, it didn't even cross his mind to not be there for his child, but because that was my story, I projected it on him. So it's like
Mm.
always preparing yourself for the worst case scenario, and you create this whole life, that is not true. It just boils down to the same thing. But yeah, that's a trait, girl.
That self-sabotage is real.
Yes, it is.
Not just in that instance, you essentially were not even offering him the opportunity to be there.
Right.
You took away his choice essentially. And that is something that I think we don't really think about or understand,
Yes.
where if you believe that someone is, not saying that they have to continuously prove their love to you, but if you believe that someone is only there because you give them money, or because you pay for everything, or you take them on trips, or you take them on drives, or you help them at work, or you give them something, and the relationship is transactional, Sometimes it is, sometimes, not gonna lie, it is transactional. But if you're only going on that assumption and there was no conversation, you're now working off of assumption. So
Yep.
then you plan to self-sabotage instead of just saying, hey Dio, I feel like I'm really not prepared to pay for XYZ. And you're like, oh, I got it, no worries.
Ah, but
Not
look at
not
that
realizing,
vulnerability,
yeah,
you made space for that, like if I can live that free, that open, that and out of shame, it's like I don't have to be ashamed. I can just be honest, and you just don't know what an honest moment can create for you.
exactly. Exactly. And I understand that it is hard. It is hard to be vulnerable. It is hard to show the ugly. It's hard to show the bad or the things that you feel ashamed of. But we only feel shame because it's hidden.
Yes. Oh,
I'm
that's
not saying that
good.
you got to walk around naked because not everybody
Right.
can be trusted.
Right.
But if you can find a good two or three people where you can honestly speak and honestly say, hey, I know that I don't really know how to handle relationships, but this does not feel comfortable to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or what you're doing is hurting me.
Mm-hmm.
Or the way you said that thing, it made me feel negative. And then maybe that can open a conversation where what they said or the way they said it triggered something from a past trauma, and now you see that person as your past and not that person as who they are.
Ooh. Ooh, say that again. You see that person as your past.
Yeah, there have been multiple times where I've had to, when people are talking to me and I'm like, oh ho ho, are you talking to me or are you talking to someone else?
Mm.
Because I don't really know you like that,
Mm.
or I know you better than that. I'm not the person who hurt you.
Yeah.
That's a trigger you really need to deal with.
Yeah.
And we say on the show all the time, therapy and Jesus will save your life.
Yes.
Therapy and Jesus will absolutely save your life.
Yes.
But I think we sometimes, until, like you said, until you get sick of tired of being sick and tired, we don't actually change. But when you get to that point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, there's so much damage, like a tornado that just tore through half of your emotional being.
Yes.
And now you have to go through, pick up the pieces, rebuild, and you probably don't even have the materials or resources to do it on your own. So instead of getting to that point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, once you get to okay, hold on, we need to stop. We need to stop. This is not feeling good to me. We need to learn how to be more in tune with our bodies, because our
Yes.
bodies absolutely keep account of what is happening. And we could say, I really didn't like that interaction. Or even, like you said, when you get a phone call and you're not expecting the phone call, huh, I don't know what they're calling for.
Yes.
Acknowledging you don't know what they're calling for, instead of
Yes.
somebody died, I owe them
Yes.
money, oh my gosh, they got hit by a car,
Right.
oh man, I did something wrong, I had to have done something wrong, did I
Yep.
turn in everything? Instead of going through that mental checklist, I don't know why they're calling. That's a fact.
Yes.
That is a true statement.
Yes.
And then when you pick up the phone, you're not fixing things that you didn't break, which I think is a very interesting concept, because you said if someone's mad, you'll do everything to try to fix it. How can you try to fix something that you didn't break, especially if you don't know the cause?
Right.
So you're plugging holes that are not there.
Mm. Or you're plugging holes with like corks that don't fit, right? Because it's not you. It wasn't
Yes.
you. It's not your problem. So your solving skill is not appropriate for this thing right here, you know? And so, and then you exhaust yourself. Now you're mad
Yes.
at the person, you know, and now there's an issue that has been created that didn't have to be there in the first place. And so now we go into like, then we go into like conflict resolution and how a lot of us can sabotage a relationship because we don't have those skills. And so as you were talking, I was like, dang, like we got to go from survival mode to being survivors. That's what we need to
Mm-hmm.
do. We need to go from trying to control everything to like raising our hands and being surrendered and happy and realizing that all the battles have already been won and we are living in a story that's already been written. Just lead with love. Just continuously lead with love and kindness and wisdom, you know, and sometimes things are going to get rough. Don't let a circumstance like drive you. Don't let a situation or an emotion drive you. You know, let it teach you something. That's how you gain wisdom, and then you move in that knowing, right? That's what wisdom is
Yes.
all about, is acting out what you already know. And so it doesn't have to be that complicated, and sometimes we need help. I was the person that the tornado had hit and everything was all over the place. And guess what? At that place, because I couldn't do it alone, is when people started entering my life and just picked up. As they entered in, there was like, whoa, it's messy in here. Let me pick this up. Let me pick that up. People started picking up and building this thing back together. This thing was me. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they put their hands to the plow, as people would say, the Lord was like moving. He was really the one doing it through them. And here I am today, still not all the way together, honey. But you know, but but I have such a greater like outlook on life and people, and it's still a work in progress, but I have that understanding that I don't know it all. I don't have it all together, and I don't have to. Like, let me just live and be in love and welcome people into my heart with wisdom.
That is such a, I'm trying to think of the word because it's it's almost like an oxymoron, right? Because you need people to help you rebuild, to expose yourself to, so that you can see a reflection of yourself in others, to get a
Yes.
clear picture of who you are.
Mm.
But if you're in survival mode, your instincts are to be away from people. Go away. Don't touch me. Don't look at me. I don't need to know. I'm the worst person ever. I've always done this. Let me just keep my head down. But there's no healing in that.
Right.
So being
Mm.
able to go through that part where people, as people were picking up, helping rebuild you and helping to show you, really, it's not that they were helping to rebuild that the devastation. They
Right.
were
Right.
helping to show you who you actually are.
Yes.
Those things had to come down. Those things had to be destroyed.
Yes.
All those crops had to be uprooted so
Yep.
that new crops, the truth, the real reflection of who you are, can show.
Yeah. You know, and a good thing you mentioned that, because I always say, like, you know, life and interaction with people is like a mirror. But before you could even see that truth and that beauty of who you truly are, created in God's image, you got to see the ugly part. Like, people come to love you so you can see that you refuse love.
Right.
You wouldn't know that otherwise, right?
Right.
Because if you're living in a bubble, you would think the way you're doing it is right. But if somebody comes to love you and then you're like growling at them because they're just trying to love you and they didn't do anything, then you realize you're exposed. You're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? That felt wrong. Like, you know, you start to feel something. You're like, something's not right with me.
Right.
That's, and there that exposure happened, and then that's why we need each other. It's uncomfortable, it stinks, it tastes bad, it looks bad, it sounds bad. Just include all your senses at bad, but at the same time you're forced to grow and to come out of that place. You realize where I'm at is not where I'm supposed to be. and get me out of here, Lord. Like, and trust me, the help will come.
I think that when people start to consider going through healing,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to heal from my past trauma, flip the switch, I'm healed.
No.
Not really considering it is one of the hardest things. And it's a lifelong commitment, but it's one of the hardest things I've personally ever had to do. It is painful, it is
Mm-hmm.
ugly.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I mean, oh, and a lot of it is done behind closed doors or with a therapist or with your community, where you feel like, oh man, there's like layers of this stuff. It's like, cleaning a house that has been abandoned for 20 years.
Yes. Whew.
And like, oh, it's but like you said, after you start seeing healing in some parts, like, oh man, I absolutely was never vulnerable, and being vulnerable now is just so freeing. But then you realize that because you have practiced, being prideful for so long, or being an independent person for so long, it those learned behaviors can absolutely start to creep back in.
Yes, they
And
can.
if you're not careful, you can fall back into your old ways. But
Yep.
keeping that community around you that you trust
Yes.
can absolutely hold you accountable. Accountability hurts sometimes, but
It
it's
does. It
absolutely
stinks.
necessary.
Yeah. It makes me think of what you said made me think about a muscle, right?
Hmm.
Healing. Like I don't I don't work out like that, but I know a little bit. So like, that's my own conviction right there. You guys don't mind me. But but you exercise and you're am I right? They say like you gotta tear the muscle to build the muscle
Hmm.
type vibe, right? And you
Yeah.
gotta build it, but then you build it, and now that one thing is easy. And sometimes we think that we have completely healed because in one layer or area of our lives, like we got it. But then that's when something new starts. Like you said, it's a lifelong commitment. So there's gonna be like layers and layers and like just different. Think about a house and how many rooms like a mansion may have. Your heart is like that. You know what I'm saying? So like once you cleaned up the room, the light is on, everything is working great. You renovated in that one room, you still got to come out and you still got to find something else, or you will find something else. And then you got to work on another part of that body, of that house, or whatever. And that's how it is. And so the hopeful thing in it is that you didn't forget that when you walked into that last room, it was just as messy, just as dark, just as bad and stinky. But with help and with grace and with a desire to see it better, you got through it. So don't give up just because a new layer has been revealed to you and there's work to be done. Like it doesn't stop. And I always say this, it's bigger than you. Where you're going, guess somebody's coming to stay in that room. That's why you
Right.
clean that room up. Somebody's coming to stay there and to stay in your house just for a little while, and you get to teach them what you've learned. And then they're going to go out and they're going to do it again, do it just like you. And so this life we live is not just about us. It's bigger than that. I always say this too, like when you overcome or you make it through something, you survived it, you get the key. Like that's your reward. Now you have the key to that room. So if somebody has that same looking room in them, you get to unlock that door for them so they can go in and do it, and you can walk them through that cleaning process too,
Right.
and
Right.
it's so rewarding once you make it through, because then you realize it's not just about you. Somebody else walks into your life and you're just like, oh my gosh, I just been through that. Like, I'm gonna tell you, have hope. And then you can keep moving. So yeah.
The only thing I'll add to that is we think things get easy once we do them. Like, oh man, I was able to bench, when I first started, I was working with 50 pounds and now I'm doing 100. Now I'm doing 150. The 50 pounds didn't get easier. You got better.
Ooh,
You
that's
are better, you are
good.
stronger. It still takes the same amount of energy to
Wow.
pull that 50-pound weight. The 50 pounds didn't get lighter. It's still
That's
50
deep.
pounds. You just got a lot better. And because you're getting better, you're like, ooh, yeah, that. But once you remember how much work it took you to get over that 50 pounds into that 75, into that 150 or 300 pounds, whatever you're pushing, or even if it's just as simple as walking. The first time you take a walk up a hill, you are out of breath and can't get up.
Yeah.
And then by the 10th time, you're like, oh, this is a breeze because you got better. Your lungs got stronger. Your heart is pumping more. Your legs are stronger. Like you are better.
Wow.
And we think that, oh, things just come easy. You are getting better. And we have to acknowledge that part. Sometimes when we're in survivor mode, we don't really consider how much work we've done. We don't just even
Mm.
take a minute right now. Think about where you were 5 years ago. Think
Yep.
about where you are now, how much
Yep.
life has changed, how much you have adapted. Now think about how many fights you could have had, how many relationships you could have sabotaged, how many jobs that you could have lost out on, how many people that you could have impacted negatively. You
Yeah.
know, not saying that you lived a perfect life or anything, but think about all the good choices that you have made to be here, even where we were 2 years ago or even last year.
Yes.
I
Yes.
always I always strive to make each year better
Yeah.
so that
That's
when I
good.
think about, man, I was bitter, I was angry. Oh, at one point I was hurtful. Why would I do that? And it was
Yes.
just thinking about how many things that we were going through where we refused to be vulnerable in a situation,
Mm.
or we refused to state fact, I don't know, so I'm going to wait,
Mm.
instead of
Mm.
I'm going to assume
Yeah.
this is negative,
That's so
so I'm going to
good.
be proactive in sabotaging it so I can just deal with the pain right now.
No. Oh, oh my gosh. That just bring I it just oh my goodness. And I get it. And you know what? You mentioned like as you were speaking, I was thinking about this journaling, but I'm gonna like backtrack a bit. Like I think that a survivor is introspective.
Mm,
That just came to me. A survivor is introspective because you're not a survivor if you are lifting these 50 pounds and it gets easier. You think, you all that in a bag of chips because you built a little muscle, forgetting that that weight didn't change. You just got a little stronger. But sometimes we're so focused on us that we think it's like, mama, we made it. You know what I'm saying?
right.
However, when you have that attitude, you're still in that place of survival mode and sabotaging, self-sabotage and stuff like that. You have to be introspective. You have to realize like, oh, I got stronger, this and get lighter because again, I always think about other people. Somebody's gonna have to pick up that 50 pound for the first time. And you better not look at that person and tell them it's easy because you were there before.
Right.
Just because you got a little stronger. Now it's if we think like this, if you believe in living like this, you're a little responsible to make sure that that person keeps going you know and so journaling I think is important because it makes you reflect, it makes you see, it makes you dig deep, it makes you find like when you're releasing things you didn't even intend to come out comes out and you realize like okay, there's still more work to do. I have no right to treat somebody else like or I like they're nothing or like they can't make it, and I have no right to walk around here haughty because I still got work to do. And when you can be like that, you can live humbly, you can live
Hmm.
kind, you can live with a lot of grace, and then like to me, like I'm a survivor, because I've overcome that nasty attitude I used to have, or
Right.
those self-protecting ways I used to have, or whatever. And I know, like, I always say this too, like, a lot of statements I make sometimes can be blanket statements. Everybody's situation is different, but I think that certain things, if implemented, it is what it is. Like, yeah, it just may take some people longer than others, and that's okay.
Right. I want to circle back to a topic of conversation that we had earlier, something that you mentioned about anxiety.
Yes.
Especially when we try to, because the first attempts are not always pretty.
Yes.
But when we come out of survivor mode and want to live, want to thrive, want to experience the present as where it is, not what it could be, not when the car crash comes,
Right.
not when the train is crossing or the plane, like not any of that, but right now as it is. One thing that I saw on it was from a therapist, and I can't remember her name, but she was talking about the generational trauma that we have experienced. You talked a little bit about that with your mom and her being a single mom and your expectation of being a single mom, and not having any assistance. Well, our anxiety is a part of what keeps us in survivor mode, because we can't go out there. There's people. We can't do this thing. We're going to fail, and then people are going to look at us, and then we're going to be the shame of the world, and we're going to be a social pariah. We can't do this. Da, 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 da. Or even we start doing something. People love it. Why do people love my stuff? Why are people coming up? Then we have this imposter syndrome thing.
Ooh.
Because we haven't done this before. We haven't received this kind of praise before. And now that people are listening, oh my gosh, what if they listen so much and they find a flaw and then everything comes down like a stack of cards? One of the things she said was the only way for us to face those things is to do it head on. So we can't wish it away. We can't be in our house and wait for it to pass like a parade. It's something that we have to face. And that is something, especially in the past couple of years, I have been really dealing with, because who am I to start a business? Who am I to start a podcast? Who am I to talk to this person? How dare I apply for this job? How bold of me to assume that I could move and be better in a different place? How dare I think I can go further than anybody else in my friend circle, or take the launch pad that my parents gave me and jump off further? How dare I? But that's exactly the point. Dare to do it. The imposter syndrome is going to come because, generationally speaking, we are in almost this renaissance of entrepreneurship, of creativity, of us being self-sustaining without the need of approval from so many people to say that we're good enough to be successful. So as you are coming out of survivor mode, just like we talked about with the thoughts, you have to take those thoughts into consideration. Maybe you are just that good.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something these people have never heard before. They're not in that industry. They don't know. But you can do it in a way that they have never seen, or a way that connects with them. Yes. Don't wait for the downfall. Enjoy the building.
Yes.
You barely got foundation and you're like, oh my gosh, the tower is going to fall.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that on so many like dimensions, like levels. It's crazy. As an artist, as someone who paints, who started painting a good 3, almost 4 years ago, and people wanting to buy my art, and I'm just like, what? Like, this looks nothing like theirs. Comparison, just starting a business too, it was just like, but I don't have people or whatever is, but everything we do, if we are going to lean in, it's all done with hope. It's all done hoping, it's all done believing, even if it's this size, you know and so I that's so I understand is what I'm saying is I understand that imposter syndrome. But I'll tell you what's been happening to me lately. Pay attention in life, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
God speaks through repetition. And in this season, for me, what God is repeating in my life personally, and maybe that's why in the beginning I was looking at you like, was because as I let go of some old things in my life, like relationships that don't bring the best out of me and don't allow the best in me to come out, because
Mm-hmm.
that's I just I yeah anyway, so I had to let go of some things, and I was so anxious and afraid of like what will happen afterwards. And so it was a battle, right, internally, for me to say no, that's not true, no, it doesn't matter anyway, no, I got to trust what God says, no, I'm doing this by faith. Like, it was war inside until I released
Mm-hmm.
and I decided to keep breathing and going. And yeah, it's for me, is that dramatic, that serious? Like, some people could be like, yeah, whatever. Unfortunately, that's just not my story. And I say unfortunately in a way, like, I used to be that way when I was heartless, when I didn't care about nobody but myself. And then I ended up caring too much, and now God's balancing me. But anyway, TMI. When I did, when I did let go, it seemed like everybody was trying to reassure everybody that knew nothing about what was happening and had nothing to do with that situation, was like reassuring me of how much I matter. And I was like, what is happening? And y'all, no lie, I used to be the type of person that think like, well, I'm about to die. Like, is that why everybody's
Mm.
like, you know, it was that bad, y'all. So but what God was saying to me was like, Dio, you're valuable. You add value wherever you go. And I want you to know that, my daughter, because just because one thing or another didn't work out the way you thought it would, the way you mustered it up in your mind, and it
Right.
didn't turn out that way, doesn't mean that it makes you a bad person. So let me just let you know. And people would come up, and this lady that I met online through a Zoom conference or something I hosted once or twice, and she was just like, I can't, I think about you all the time. I was like, me? She was like, yeah, I just think about you all the time. You're just so sweet. I was like, so then the other lady was like, you do know you leave a print in people's lives, right? I was like, I mean, I guess, like, so, and it kept on coming up. It kept on coming up. And then you came, and I was like, what? But that will happen. So just pay attention, even when it comes to purpose, even when it comes to, you know a lot of the times, the things that we go through, though it's hard, it sucks, the healing process, all of that. And the only reason why the healing process hurts and sucks the way it does is because you're breaking out of this box that you have lived in for so long,
Right.
or a wall. I always think about a wall that you've just been working on build, what I'm saying, one brick after another, and it's so high and it's so strong, and now you're like running, trying to break this thing through. Imagine before you break through, how much pain it hurts. It's
Yeah.
gonna hurt. You might have a little fractured shoulder. Like, don't worry, you're gonna be okay, it's gonna heal, but you gotta get through. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I'm gonna stop right there because I just drew a blank.
It's funny. It's funny that you think of a wall, because I think of the scene in Kill Bill. I mean, there are so many scenes that have done this, where the person is essentially buried alive, and the work that she
Mm.
has to do to get out of it. First, you have to realize where you are, and then once you snap back to reality and was like, wait a minute, am I 6 feet under? And now you have to not only break out of this casket, now you have to dig through the earth to get to the top, to hopefully get to a community that can help you start rebuilding who you are. So yeah, like I can only imagine how tough it, especially if you're a person who think that you have no like wilderness survival skills, then absolutely you would be frantic and trying to figure out how do I, yeah, like how do I do this?
Right. I
Like
could only
how,
imagine the fear, the anxiety, the thoughts that would come from somebody trying to dig themselves out once they realize I'm alive and I've been dug deep into a hole.
right.
Imagine that. So ex in a way, expect that. Hopefully, there's people surrounding you. Like maybe y'all. I have a whole movie in my head now. Imagine like you dug yourself in that, right? All your friends are surrounding you. They was like, no, stop it. And you're just like, no, I'm going in. And you go in and you say, put the dirt on me. And so your friends are like, fine, then I'm putting the dirt on you, like, because you're so mad and angry. And then you lay down. And once you've rested, because a lot of the times we don't stop. We don't stop to just breathe. Once you laying in there, you got nothing else to do, nobody else to talk to, and you finally take a few deep breaths and send to yourself, you realize, what the heck did I just do? And now you're like,
Yeah.
get me out. Hopefully you still got friends out there waiting for you to realize it, because what they'll do is help you. They'll dig you out while you dig it up and pull you out of that thing. It's like, don't you ever do that again, So community is important.
Yes, it is.
Oh God. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I would love for you to tell the people a little bit about how to find you, about your podcast, your books, your work. If they wanted to contact you, if they want to do a session with you, let them know how they can reach out.
Yeah, wow, there's so much, but we're gonna just okay. So on social media platforms, it's Dioveris. My first name is that's gonna show, right? My name on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dioveris Artistry. Because yeah, so Dioveris Artistry on all platforms. In the link in my bio, every single thing that I do is on there. So if you're interested in a therapeutic paint session or creative coaching session, you can contact me through there. You'll see my artwork there. That's Dioveris Artistry. For my podcast, it's The Prophet and the Tea, like drinking tea podcast. Spell it all out. On all major podcast platforms. I'm also on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. So just real quick, I want to share, because I'm actually relaunching on the 22nd. Oh, this is going to be later, but whatever. The 22nd of February, it's relaunching. And so you'll have partial episodes on public platforms, but on the private platform, Patreon, full-blown episodes. And it gets really deep, which is why I'm doing it that way, so that, you can really like get the real raw, deep stuff that probably shouldn't be on all major, public platforms. So yeah, go ahead and follow me. And my podcast specifically speaks about being single and waiting, being a parent or a co-parent. A co-parent doesn't have to be a mom and a dad. It could be a grandma, it could be a teacher, it could be a friend, a godparent. And then faith. It's all faith-based. And how do we walk this thing out? Because a lot of the times in church, you get these rules like, don't do this, don't do that, da 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 da. But you don't have an understanding of the freedom that you have in the Lord, and then how to walk it out, not by following rules, but by being exactly, who God says you are. But to know more, go visit me. What I'm saying, come holler at me. You can send me a message or whatever, but don't mind me. Yeah, that's it.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you go follow Dio at Dioveris Artistry, and make sure that you click everything. Just click all the things so you can make sure you find out, because you're going to find something that you like and a part that you want to be, and something that you want to be a part of. I personally did the therapeutic painting. When I tell you the picture that I typically have in the back of the heart on stage, that was done with Dio. So make sure that you go and follow her and support her. And then make sure that you follow Take Up Space Podcast if you're not already at Take Up Space Pod That's Take Up Space POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then make sure you follow us on YouTube. You can either look us up at Take Up Space Pod or Champions of Discourse, and you'll find all of our videos there so you can see our lovely faces. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to our guest, Dio. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I hope that you all are having a wonderful, wonderful day. Please share this with those who may need it. Some people are dealing with anxiety, imposter syndrome, and lack of vulnerability, all that other stuff. And this may be the thing they need to help them break out of that and realize that they have buried themselves deep. So make sure you share it. Thank you so much. We really, really, really appreciate your support. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're really shooting for 1,000 this year. We're at 133 now. So your support absolutely helps. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.